discussion on a very, very special and very fabulous book written by Akshaya Mukul. It's a biography of a Hindi writer, sort of colossus of Hindi literature. He was a poet, a short story writer, a novelist, a journalist, and his name is Sachidanand Hiranand Vatsyayan Agyeya, better known as just Agyeya. So Akshay, you spent 5 years researching this book, am I right?
Yeah.
What was the toughest part about doing such a massive project?
With Agyeya, see, thankfully he had left behind massive papers, but there were major loopholes in that narrative. So that narrative took me to all kinds of places. Some I managed to plug the loopholes, many I could not. Especially when it came to his personal life and his relationship with Kapila Vatsyayan, even and because Kapila refused to talk. That took a lot of time because his own papers run over around 70,000 pages. And then there was this papers in Chicago, some in Stanford, some in New York Rockefeller Archives. So put together, yeah. And then on top of it, I'm a very slow writer. So that kind of, so it's almost like undergrad course now for me. Doing a book is undergrad project.
Like a PhD on
Yeah, and undergrad. PhD is now 8 years, so yeah.
Akshay, you've written about him as a writer and about his personal life, both aspects, Agyeya as a person and as a writer and journalist and author and so on. Were you at any point, did you think, oh, I can't really put this in because it's, I don't know, too controversial or it's too sensational? Did you ever censor or edit yourself?
No, I did not. Whatever was there, whatever I could kind of, whatever there was evidence of, and when I say evidence, I mean archival evidence, be it existing in his own papers or someone else's private papers. That I consider kind of sacrosanct, and I have put. There's nothing has been censored, except I did 60 interviews, and I realized that except for 3 people, I think, or 2 people, Krishna Sopti and Hindi poet Kumar Narayan, most of the people were trying to fix Agyeya even after his death. So I didn't, because I couldn't find any corroborative evidence. What Krishna Sopti said or Kumar Narayan said, you could see it. And another person I forgot to mention is Mukul, one of India's best known, not so well known, but yeah, one of India's best philosophers, art historian, art writer in Jaipur. And he had this kind of, he hung around with that group for long, but he always distanced himself from that group. And he had that kind of, and he was very clear about what that gang worked, what happened to Agyeya in his last 10 years of his life, and everything. So except these 3, most of the interviews I couldn't use because I was not very sure what they were trying to do. Yeah.
We'll come back to some of the controversies in Agyeya's life. Yatish ji, you yourself are a poet. आप खुद बहुत अच्छी कविता लिखते हैं. And Agyeya is supposed to be the man who ushered in a new era of Hindi poetry. जब तार सप्तक छपी थी 1943 में I think.
43.
हाँ, 43 में. तो that was supposed to be a big moment in Hindi poetry. तो आपने उनकी कविता पढ़ी है, आपको उनकी कविता से आपको कुछ उत्साह भी मिला है, कुछ प्रोत्साहन भी मिला है?
उस समय नई कविता और नई कहानी दोनों का एक मोड़ आया था और प्रेमचंद्र के बाद नई कहानी का दौर है. तो मैं बताऊंगा जैसे कि आज के लिए भी जो पर्टिनेंट कविता है उनकी कि जो पुल बनाएंगे वो अनिवार्यतः पीछे रह जाएंगे, सेनाएं हो जाएंगी पार और मारे जाएंगे रावण, जयी होंगे राम, जो निर्माता रहे इतिहास में वही बंदर कहलाएंगे. अब सोचिए इतना बड़ा स्टेटमेंट एक 5 लाइन की कविता दे रही है, तो वो व्यक्ति आपको हमेशा एक न्यूट्रल लाइन दिखाने की कोशिश करता है. मैंने जितना उनको पढ़ा है और मैंने देखा कि कोई भी व्यक्ति उनसे पूरी तरह घृणा नहीं कर सकता, प्रेम कर सकता है. और जितने भी रिलेशनशिप अक्षय जी ने एक्सप्लेन किए हैं, चाहे वो जैनेंद्र के हों या चाहे नेमी चंद्र जी के हों, अग्रवाल जी के हों, जितने भी अच्छे रिलेशनशिप जो शुरुआत से चले, या वाजपेयी जी के हों, नामवर सिंह जी के हों, सब में वो मतलब एक चीज है जो अटका के रखा है कि वो अक्षय वो अज्ञेय हैं और अज्ञेय एक स्तंभ हैं और वो स्तंभ को कोई हिला नहीं सकता.
लेकिन Agyeya had a difficult relationship with a lot of contemporary writers. Either it was because of ego or personality clash or political differences or whatever it was. Where do you put his his relationships in the Hindi literary world? Do you think he himself was also often to not blame, but because of him also the relationships were often prickly and difficult or is that the nature of the Hindi literary world?
Partly nature of the Hindi world and partly Agyeya himself. Agyeya he would be very intensely, he had very intense relationship with, say, someone like Bharat Bhushan Agrawal, who was instrumental in getting him to this city, Calcutta, making him editor of Visal Bharat. But in no time, Agyeya didn't want to be under his shadow for far too long. He became editor of Visal Bharat, so he became editor of Visal Bharat. Because this one, what is his name? Chaturvedi was still trying to run, Banarsi Das Chaturvedi was still trying to run it from Agra or Tikamgarh. He would not let that happen.
He had a falling out.
He had a falling out. And then he had a falling out even with the owner, the great Ramanand Chatterjee. And and he's very young and he tells Ramanand Chatterjee that, look, you are anti-Hindi. And Ramanand Chatterjee tells him, look, I am the one who's incurring loss, and this is 1930s, mind you, and a loss of almost 70,000 rupees a year on Visal Bharat because it doesn't get me money, and you're telling me I'm anti-Hindi. So he had that. That was typical Agyeya. So he would not take, he would not suffer someone just because there is a great friendship. And same thing happened with Janendra Kumar. He wanted to get out of his shadow. Janendra was instrumental in getting him published.
Yes.
Janendra was instrumental in getting him the name Agyeya because he took his story from jail to Premchand. But the moment Janendra started interfering in his personal life, conniving with his father to get him a girl to marry, he says, look, this is no way to marry someone. I don't want to marry someone just because you have chosen someone. And that the relationship gets over. Similarly, and we see that happening. Later on, this assumes also by 70s, he's become kind of prophet. He's a messiah. So he also doesn't suffer. So he surrounded himself with very mediocre people. Last of the two great Hindi poets, Raghuvir Sahai and Sarveshwar Dayal Saxena, they come close to him. But then you find that themselves remove themselves from the coterie.
He seems to repel them away also.
Yeah, he seems to repel them away, and they're very, very clear. You can see Raghuvir Sahai had a great reverence for him. But there is this kind of, he becomes very cold. Even when the obituary of Raghuvir Sahai of Agyeya is very cold compared to the way Agyeya nurtured him. Agyeya got him to work in Vak, which was the English journal which had started for a very brief while. But somehow Agyeya attacked him in the sense he became editor of Dinman after Agyeya, Raghuvir Sahai. And he said that now Dinman has become pamphlet. He wrote a famous limerick, how, patrikaएं ban gaye hain parche. Something like that. So Agyeya also repelled a lot of these people. And we know what the story with women is a completely different story.
Yatish ji, there are two big stalwarts of Hindi literature who one is still, very much there today. One passed away recently. There's Ashok Vajpayee and Namwar Singh. तो अगेय जी का उनके साथ जो रिलेशनशिप था दोनों के साथ वो भी बहुत पेचीदा था.
ये बहुत अच्छा प्रश्न है आपका. इनफैक्ट ये दोनों मैंने देखा है कि जो भी व्यक्ति अगेय के पास जाता है उनसे बात करता है तो वो चीज़ें क्लाउड क्लियर हो जाती है. अब नामवर जी का अगर हम बात करें तो नामवर सिंह कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी के और जो वो पूरा जो इशू था जो उनके चारों तरफ अगेय के चारों तरफ घिरा हुआ था तो उसमें नामवर सिंह जी सेंटर में थे. और जब जोधपुर में इनके प्रोफेसर बनने की बारी आई और जब वो दोनों साथ रहने लगे,
किनके प्रोफेसर बनने की?
अगेय जब वॉक से और सब चीज से करके जब लौट आए और कैलिफोर्निया से लौट के आए तो अंत में नौकरी उनको जोधपुर यूनिवर्सिटी मिली. वहां पे नामवर सिंह ऑलरेडी हिंदी पढ़ा रहे थे. उसके पहले हर बार जब तार सब तक निकला या बाकी चीजें हुई तो नामवर हमेशा उनके अगेंस्ट में उनके रिव्यूज थे. लेकिन जब साथ में रहने लगे तो वो व्यक्ति, वही नामवर, उनके साथ पहली हो गए बिल्कुल। और जब बाद में जब चौथी बार बुलाने पर भारत भवन जाते हैं तो नामवर सिंह जी साथ में रहते हैं उनके। अब मैं सागर यूनिवर्सिटी से बात शुरू करता हूं। तो अशोक वाजपेयी 18 साल का युवा, और उसके जब वो 9वीं कक्षा में है तो उसको एक किताब दी जाती है, वो अज्ञेय की कविता की किताब है, और उससे वो इन्फ्लुएंस होकर नई कविता में आता है। फिर वो कम्युनिज्म के और जो एक छंद के कविता के घेराव में आता है, और जब अज्ञेय वहां जाते हैं तो कहता है कि आप क्या लिख रहे हैं ये। ऐसे अशोक वाजपेयी जब बाद में उन्होंने जब दिल्ली आए वो पढ़ने के लिए, तो उनके घर हर शाम जाते थे, बैठते थे अगेंस्ट में जाने के बाद। लेकिन बाद में जब वो सिविल सर्विसेज करने के बाद जब मध्य प्रदेश में सेंटर बनाने लगे भोपाल में, तो पूरा पलट गया, पूरा का पूरा सिचुएशन बदल गया। और वाजपेयी तो क्रिटिक थे, जैसे कि जिस अवार्ड जो मिला अज्ञेय को अगर हम बोलें, तो उस अवार्ड में झूठा सच और अज्ञेय की किताब जो है, और तीनों थी। तो उन तीनों किताबों में वाजपेयी ने रिजाइन कर दिया कि झूठा सच उनको लगा कि बेहतर किताब है। जाकर के अज्ञेय को फिर अवार्ड मिला, अवार्ड इसी कलकत्ता में मिला। तो मैं देख रहा हूं इसके बाद भी अज्ञेय जो हैं वो पेशेंटली सुन रहे हैं, उनको रिफ्यूज कर रहे हैं वाजपेयी को लगातार। वाजपेयी हर वर्ष जो गोष्ठी करते हैं उसमें उनको बुलाते हैं, एक केंद्रित कार्यक्रम करते हैं उसमें बुलाते हैं। बहुत पोलाइटली वो रिफ्यूज करते हैं कि मैं भारत भवन में सरकारी संस्था है वहाँ नहीं जाऊँगा। उसके पहले एक बार वो जाते भी हैं तो कहते हैं कि भाई मैं पैसे नहीं लूँगा सरकारी संस्था से। सो बहुत सारा कन्फ्लिक्ट इन दोनों के बीच चलता आ रहा है, आप देखेंगे। लेकिन 87 में जब वो आते हैं और उनके ऊपर केंद्रित पूरा संगोष्ठी होता है, तो अज्ञेय जाते हैं, उनके पास जाते हैं, वहाँ पे 3 दिन बिताते हैं। और नामवर सिंह जी वहाँ पे जब अच्छे मित्र हो जाते हैं और कहते हैं कि अज्ञेय का जो दुख है, अज्ञेय तो विजार्ड हैं लेकिन उन्होंने जो दुख एक्सप्रेस किया वो अच्छा, मतलब वो एक फ्रेंड की तरह कहते हैं ये बात। लेकिन जो समाज है हिंदी का वो उसको ट्विस्ट कर देता है। तो बेसिकली मैं सार ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि एक ऑरा एक जो बना पूरा उस समय सीपीआई के अंदर कम्युनिस्ट का पूरा अज्ञेय के अगेंस्ट में, वो इन दोनों को इन्फ्लुएंस किया है। और इन दोनों जब डायरेक्ट संपर्क में आए हैं तो वो क्लाउड हट गया।
Do you want to add anything to this, Akshay?
Not much. Kind of. See, with Bajpayee was also, in fact, when this Chicago University started, CM Naim started this very famous, very short-lived though, journal called Mahfil. And they brought the very second issue is on Agyeya, and there you find one of the most laudatory pieces written on Agyeya by very young Ashok Bajpayee. Many years later, by I think 60s, he wrote that famous piece based on T.S. Eliot's line saying, "Buddha gid pankh kyun phailaya? Why the old eagle should spread its wing?" That's when the relationship completely kind of, snapped between the two. And it took many years, as Yatish was saying,
Transition point.
to build that relationship. I think only in the 80s, year or two before death, they kind of patched up, and partly because Ela played a big role in that. And after Aggey's death, Ela brought him into the trust which Agyeya had set up, which he's still part of. Yeah.
So talking about Ela, so Aggey's relationships with the women in his life are fraught with problems. Whether it was, his relationship with Kripa Sen, which you brought to light, which people didn't know about, whether it was his marriage to Kapila Vatsyayan, or whether it was, his cousin sister Indumati. What is there is some tension always in the relationship, and Agyeya is not able to give love and care and warmth, extend all these emotions to the women in his life. Why? Do you have any answer to that? And why
I
is
have
that?
actually no answer, but if you come to look at it, it all starts with his mother. He's probably one of the rare writers I know, painter, artist, who has absolutely nothing to say about his mother. If at all he says it was not a good relationship with his mother. In fact, when she dies in Dalhousie, he is writing to Janendra Kumar in the 3rd paragraph of the letter that mother is dead. And Janendra Kumar is completely astounded that your mother is dead. And he is only worried about getting out of Lahore somehow. Because mother was unwell in Dalhousie, and from Lahore he was allowed to go to Dalhousie somehow. So, and he says also that I don't have good memory or great memory or even a memory of mother. Mother is not there in his works. There is a lot about his father. So it all starts from there. And so all women, beat his mother we don't know much, because mother didn't leave anything behind in terms of writing or anything, but all other women we find are very miserable in his relationship. They are madly in love also, they're all miserable also. And so, and I know of, so many people who were people who were closely associated with Ila or Kapila, who were saying that, there's this thing about Agyeya, they could never put their finger on what is wrong. But they were hugely, all of them could do anything to be with him. And he was very extractive. He was very, very extractive. Almost all women in his life, they nursed him. In terms of financially, they took care of him, and then he just kind of moved on very easily, and wrote with all his creativity. He wrote very boring separation letters to all his women. Almost here a template letter. If you see the first letter he writes to his first wife, Santosh, then to Kapila, then to that lover. Before that, Kripa Sen, everyone. Even with Ela, it's not a smooth relationship. We find a year before death, she's 33 years younger to him, and she's saying, if you tell me to keep my mouth shut, I'll keep my mouth shut, but please keep talking to me. What is it about this man? I tried asking many people, and one very famous psychoanalyst told me, listen, you write biography, don't get into this. You'll never get it. Leave it for the readers to decide. Yeah, but all women were miserable.
Even कपिला इला के आने के बावजूद, मतलब लगभग 10 साल अगर हम कहें, तो वो लेटर्स वो लिखती रही, बिल्कुल नॉर्मल. उन्होंने कभी ये मतलब शादी नहीं तोड़ी, अपनी तरफ से कोई वैसा प्रयास नहीं किया, और वो मतलब शादी के समय जो डेथ हुआ है अज्ञेय का, तो भी वो आई हैं वहाँ पे और रही हैं वहाँ पे. तो ये एक अलग व्यक्ति है जो उससे, मैंने आपको शुरू में जो कहा कि उससे डिटैच फुल्ली कोई नहीं हो सकता, चाहे उसका कितना बड़ा भी अपोनेंट हो. मैं अगर बात करूं, एग्जांपल देना चाहता हूं आपको, कि जब ये विशाल भारत पे काम कर रहे थे और अंतिम जो निकाल रहे थे वो प्रति, उसमें उन्होंने बलराज साहनी को छापा, जिसको उन्होंने पहले नहीं छापा था. और उसी बलराज साहनी से संतोष की शादी बाद में होती है लंदन में. वही बलराज साहनी जब ये थक जाते हैं, विशाल भारत में बिल्कुल हताश हो जाते हैं, तो वही बलराज साहनी कहते हैं कि तुमको मैं चलो लंदन ले चलता हूँ. मतलब क्या है ये, कौन सी दोस्ती, कौन सी दुश्मनी, कहाँ क्या हो रहा है. अगर हम उस चैप्टर से हम थोड़ा सा हटे, तो जैसे मैं अज्ञेय के पास आया प्रकाशवती को ढूंढते हुए, यशपाल को ढूंढते हुए, सिंहावलोकन को ढूंढते हुए. वहाँ सिंहावलोकन में यशपाल ने एक सिर्फ जिक्र कर दिया है कि भाई बोरा जी का जो डेथ हुआ है बम ब्लास्ट में, तो एक चादर जो है वो अज्ञेय के पास से आई. इतना कह के यशपाल चुप हो गए हैं, लेकिन प्रकाशवती चुप नहीं हुई है. प्रकाशवती ने पूरा एक्सप्लेन किया है कि हम कैसे डलहौजी में रहे 3 महीने. इंटरेस्टिंग बात, जो चूंकि आप स्त्रियों के बारे में बात करें इसलिए मैंने जिक्र किया, इंटरेस्टिंग बात यह है यहाँ पे कि प्रकाशवती और ये 2 महीने पहाड़ में रहते हैं, कभी कोई कंट्रोवर्सी नहीं आती, जबकि हरिवंश राय बच्चे और प्रकाशवती में कंट्रोवर्सी आती है, दिल्ली का, इलाहाबाद का. लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप मतलब अज्ञेय जिस भी स्त्री के साथ 10 दिन रह लेते हैं तो वो अफेयर हुआ था, ऐसा नहीं है. देयर इज समथिंग एल्स व्हिच कैन नॉट बी अंडरस्टैंड.
Was there any one woman who you would say was really the love of his life?
His own cousin, Indumati.
Was she a constant factor?
Yeah. Ditto. Indumati, and after that, Kripa Sen. Kripa Sen, the entire novel is Kripa Sen. Nadi Ke Dood is entirely is Kripa Sen. And Kripa Sen is the only one who could engage with him at his own level. She could throw tantrums. We don't find anyone else throwing tantrums or kind of admonishing him or telling him that she'll leave him. Or, and she can match his scholarship in many ways. She knew English, Bangla, Persian, Urdu, except Hindi, she knew all the languages. She was part of your usual United Province, Central Provinces elite. She was moving with the Dayal family. Her father was the first principal of Dayal Singh College. But even she becomes miserable at the end of it. We don't know. I spent good 3 months tracking her, where she went. She came from a very influential family in Indore. And I just couldn't find, there's no one. The Velinka family, one section of Velinka family runs group of educational institutions. They have no clue, nobody wants to talk. She died somewhere in Europe. She was great friend of Raja Rao. In fact, Raja Rao, when after all this he lands in Europe, is a Raja Rao who takes care of her for a long, long time. Yeah, so these two women.
And Indumati?
Indumati also again, Indumati
was his cousin.
disappears. Indumati was his first cousin, his what we call Bua in Bangla, PC's daughter. And they're very close, very, very close. And all two relationships actually, they both in Santosh, his first wife, and Kripa say that, look, if you want to be with her, but don't kind of be confused about us. And ultimately, if you want to, so we are very willing to go off your life if you're willing to stay with Indumati. In fact, Indumati, within a week of the marriage with Santosh, you find Indumati is the one who's wearing the wedding ring.
Yes.
And that completely kind of destroys her, Santosh. That what is happening here. Same thing with Kripa. By the time Kapila comes into his life, she's faded away. She's gone to Bangladesh, which is now part of Bangladesh. She's gone there to work. She's part of some Gandhi ashram. So she becomes recluse. And strangely enough, even family doesn't want to talk much about her. Yeah. So,
Must have suffered.
Yeah,
She's
she
the
suffered.
character of Shashi in
yeah,
Shekhar
yeah, in
Ek
Shekhar Ek
Jeevni.
Jeevni, she is the character of Sasi. Yeah.
So talking about Shekhar Ek Jeevni, Agyey's two best-known novels are, of course, Shekhar Ek Jeevni and Nadi Ke Dweep. And then he's written many, many short stories and, of course, poetry as well. So if we just come to his novels and his short stories, is there anything that strikes you as to why and how these are remarkable? In what way are they remarkable? And आपसे भी पूछूंगी कि इन कहानियाँ जो है, जो इनके उपन्यास हैं, उसमें क्या आपको खूबी लगती है? What makes them special or great?
See, I'll come to Shekhar. Shekhar Ek Jeevni is a great novel, probably one of the best 10 among the 10 best Hindi novels of the last 100 years or so. But again, Shekhar has to be read at a certain age. If you read it at 16, 17, 18, in your early 20s, it's a completely mind-blowing novel. It's probably the first Hindi novel which is talking of an individual. And that also marks the departure from the Premchand era of larger societal concerns. One man's story, his
turmoil
concerns,
in his
the
head.
turmoil, his fears. What if he's going to get death sentence? He's a revolutionary. It's entirely against life. And but it's in the long term, I like Nadi Ke Dweep for it's not really a novel. It's probably one of the best exposition on the anti-fascism thing, which the confusion with the Indian political system, the 1940s, whether we should join the war, not join the war, whether it should be part of the British Empire. It's probably one of the best in Hindi, and I think across languages explanation which comes. And it also, in the long run, it I guess suffered because of that novel, because everyone said, how come a revolutionary of the late 1920s and early 30s had joined British Army in the 40s? So was he all along a British agent? You know, but at the cost of that, he joins British Army. And he suffers it. Everyone calls him British agent throughout. So in the long term, I think Nadi Ke Dweep, it's a badly translated in English, which was done by Agyeya himself. Someone should translate it. It's a novel waiting to be translated. It's absolutely brilliant novel, and it's
In
a
fact,
better
I
novel.
always find that one of the big contradictions in Agye's life is that, the nationalist movement is sweeping India, the Quit
Yeah.
India movement is at its peak. And at that point, he decides to go and join the British Army.
Yeah.
It's a
वहाँ पे
funny, it's a strange
And he
decision.
says, the fascism is a bigger battle. When he writes this long love letter to Kripa Sen, when she says, only fools and morons join army, and a writer like you, what will you do in army? Will you take orders from someone? And then he explains, it's a long letter, runs into some 7-8 pages, which all of which is in the novel actually.
Trying to just justify
And he says it, and it's again another contradictory position of against that point. He says it's a writer's job to do this. Writers should not only write, he should join, if he has, he should show it that he has a point of view on fascism and should join the army. By 60s, when the Duke University does this huge archive interview with him, he says it's not a writer's job to bring the change. So it's a completely changed Agyeya. But that contradictions made him what he became. You know, he's full of contradiction.
आपको क्या लगता है यतीश जी?
मैं कह रहा था उसके पहले एक्चुअली जो जापानीज मूवमेंट हुआ इंडिया के लिए, वो जापानीज मूवमेंट को जो अक्षय बोल रहे हैं, तो बेसिकली उन्होंने पहले पोइट्स को भी इकट्ठा किया कि लेट अस यूनाइट. इनफैक्ट हर बार उन्होंने कोशिश की कि पोइट इकट्ठा हो, चाहे प्रतीक लाए या नया प्रतीक लाए, या हर बार उनका पैसा आता था और फिर वो एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनाने में खर्च हो रहा था. तो आर्मी ज्वाइन करने से पहले उनको था कि भाई जापानीज को कैसे हम बचाएं. वो जो एक आग थी कि भाई आप 6 साल आपने जेल में बिताए हैं और आप बम बना रहे थे, आप कुछ भी कर रहे थे, आप चंद्रशेखर के साथ थे, आप यशपाल के साथ थे, प्रकाशों के साथ थे, लेकिन सडनली उनका कंट्री का था कि भाई हमारा रोल क्या है. देन ही ज्वाइंड और वो आसाम में रहे पूरा. और सबसे अच्छी बात है कि 43 में बिफोर लिविंग आर्मी वो नेमीचंद जी के पत्नी रेखा के पास जाते हैं, तार सप्तक निकालते हैं, उसके बाद जाते हैं, वो कहते हैं कि भाई आई एम सॉरी. मैं इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ कैरेक्टर को डिफाइन करने के लिए बोल रहा हूँ. हमारा मतलब टॉपिक है कि भाई आप क्यों अक्षय को अज्ञेय को समेट नहीं सकते. वो बंदा जाके कहता है कि भाई तार सप्तक तो एक्चुअली में नेमीचंद जी का आइडिया था, है ना. और हम मतलब मेरी आत्मग्लानी, जब मैं डिफेंस में रहा हूँ, मेरी आत्मग्लानी हमको आपके पास ला रही है, मैं एक्सेप्ट करता हूँ इस बात को. तो मैंने देखा है अज्ञेय को अपनी पर्सनालिटी को बदलते हुए, बाहर वालों के लिए नहीं. तो जो आपका जो पहला प्रश्न था कि उनकी कहानियों में क्या है, तो उनके कहानियों में अंतर्मन की व्यथा है ज़्यादा. वो अंदर की बात करते हैं, एक ह्यूमन के इनसाइड टर्मोइल की बात करते हैं. जबकि प्रेमचंद, वो खुद भी अपने इंटरव्यू में, ब्रिटिश BBC के इंटरव्यू में कहते हैं कि भाई प्रेमचंद जो है वो दुनिया समाज के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. मेरी यात्रा अंतर्मुखी यात्रा है. और मेरी सारे का नदी के द्वीप भी, अगर हम आई एग्री विथ अक्षय मुकुल की नदी के द्वीप मेरे लिए भी वन ऑफ द बेस्ट नॉवेल है. और उसमें वो उनकी कृपा और वो कृष्णचंद्र जो जिन्होंने इंटरव्यू में इंट्रोड्यूस कराया कृपा को अज्ञेय के पास, बाद में खुद ही प्रपोज भी किया, वो सब कुछ आपको वहाँ दिख जाएगा.
Talking about contradictions, I think we've talked about this before, how he became a revolutionary, and after spending time in jail, he was scared that something really bad was going to happen to him. So he said, no, I was not a revolutionary. I didn't do anything. He quickly backtracked. That is strange.
That's again.
Is that classic Agyeya?
Yeah, that's classic Agyeya, and that's probably one of the first big signs of contradiction which comes in Agyeya. Because even while going through his private papers, you find that, you know, this was construed very differently by the leftists. Who said he kind of apologized or said sorry and all that. Well, it's not there. He just kind of created a huge evidence, right from all the staff of Home and Christian College to everyone saying that no, he was on that day, he was here, he was not there. But strangely enough, his private papers have writings from Dalhousie when he is hiding from Britishers.
And he was called scientist.
He was called scientist, and there are at least testimonies. If you look at the records, they're running with some 1,500 pages. Everyone comes, even those who were kind of helping British government from the group of HSRA. Everyone said more or less gave the same statement about Agyeya, that he was the man who was making bombs. He was brought in from Lahore to make bombs there. And but Agyeya later on just to wriggle out of it. And that's the time he also made friendship with one of these gentlemen, this British police officer, who asks him to join, who kind of helped him join British Army during the Second World War. I think some Mr. White or something, who became his friend. Yeah.
The nice thing is, in a way, that all these experiences, whether it was in the army, whether it was Agyeya as a revolutionary, all these he mined for his short stories. He has short stories about army life in the Northeast. He has stories about revolutionaries. He has many different kinds of stories. And he also unusually has 3 stories set in Russia with Russian characters. I think the best known is Vipadga, about a revolutionary young woman. How did these Russian stories find their way in his writing?
See, that's a time when he's even in his writings, even in his, if you correspondence with people, you will find that he's reading a lot on what is happening all over the world. He's very, very well updated. And Bipatka's story has a bit of a kind of, when the story came and it got published in
Vipadka is a story about a Russian revolutionary woman.
and when the story appeared, you will find a counter story by another gang was published in Bisal Bharat to kind of make fun of him. It was called Supatka. You know, and with a very Indian characters. They said, oh, what is he doing? He's writing with Western characters. So someone, they ganged up and prepared a story.
पूर्वग्रह में भी काफी
in Supatka. So then there is another story. In fact, that eventually, even if you see the last novel, third one, which is Apne Apne Ajnabi, it's entirely based in Lapland and it's all Western characters. First, he wanted that story to be based in Jharkhand, in Dhanbad, coal mine, or flood, or with a setting of flood in Lucknow. But didn't work out for him, so he moved there. And again, a lot of people said, well, look at Agyeya, you know, his characters are broad, in foreign characters, foreign locals and all that. And Nirmal Verma, and he had a great, once, although they were great friends, Nirmal Verma once told him also that why do you have to say things, why do you have to go to someone's house to say something, you know, someone else's house.
एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग उनका कैरेक्टर था कि वो लोगों को खींच ले आते थे. आप अगर प्रतीक का ही देखें कि इलाहाबाद में उन्होंने सेटअप किया, कार बेच दी, फिर से नेमीचंद को लेके आए बॉम्बे से उठा करके, फिर से जो है वो सिरपत राय को एक घर में ले आए, दास फैमिली जो थी. और बाद में भी मैं देखता हूँ, मतलब इवन नया प्रतीक जब बनाते हैं तो उनका ये पावर की परसुएशन का जो पावर है उसमें वो ईगो भूल जा रहे हैं. अदरवाइज उनका जो परसोना है वो ईगो वाला है. ऐसे जगह पे जब उनका एम बड़ा होता है तो ईगो वो अपने आप डाउन कर लेते हैं. सच ग्रेट पर्सनालिटी.
Agyeya also had a very long and illustrious and interesting career as a journalist. He was with Vishal Bharat, then there was Pratik, Vak, then Dinman, then Navbharat Times. How would you rate him as a journalist and editor?
In fact, somehow Agyeya's, when people talk of Agyeya, somehow his life as a journalist doesn't get written about that much. It starts with Sainik, where he started working first in Agra, and you find he brings in someone like M.N. Roy to write. He translates M.N. Roy, and M.N. Roy's probably that's the first byline in the Hindi world. And that because that for a brief while, Agyeya was also involved with his peasants movement in Meerut and other places. And after jail, M.N. Roy was kind of touring Western Uttar Pradesh, and they became friends, and they became lifelong friends. Then, and you find some new features he's introducing in a paper, in a weekly paper, which was essentially a Congress mouthpiece in the 1930s. Same thing in Bisal Bharat, the kind of writings on literature, art, he adds new features. And then we see, when you see Pratik, Pratik is also innovative in so many ways. It's probably the first journal which is not based on your, which is indexed on the basis of seasons, Magh, Push and all that. And then he gets even some of the people he didn't like otherwise to get them to write. That was one of the key thing about Agyeya. He even get his critics to write in the journal. And Vak was a very, very innovative experience by these three people, Vatsayan, Mulk Rajanand, and Case for Humayun Kabir. You find early writings of A.K. Ramanujan. You find someone like this great Sri Lankan painter. Everyone is writing there. And environment reporting. By the time he comes to Dinman, and Chandi Prasad Bhatt told me how he kind of, he'll say, whatever you see there, you write. I will kind of, I'll make it, I'll draw sense out of whatever you write, but you tell me what is happening. So early environmental writing on women's issues, you find even this Jayaprakash Narayan's weekly, which he launched, Everyman's in 1973.
Everyone's done.
Yeah, Everyman's journal is like, it's unbelievable. It's a journal launched to take on Indira Gandhi. There is cricket. There is one of the rarest interview of M.K. Karunanidhi, M. Karunanidhi as writer. So, he's doing that. Navbharat Times, he completely changed everyone who worked in that period. So yeah, his role as a journalist is kind of underrated, not talked about too much.
थोड़ा सा ऐड करता हूँ मैं अक्षय के साथ जो है, अगर पेन कांग्रेस को लें, फिर वॉक को लें, फिर दिनमान 65 में आया, फिर बर्कली कैलिफोर्निया, मतलब इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे जब वॉक में आए हैं वो, और जो मल्टीलैंग्वेज चीज़ें हिंदी बांग्ला के साथ साथ श्रीलंका और बांग्लादेश और सब सारे पोइट्स को उन्होंने इकट्ठा किया है, तो एक टेक ऑफ मिला है उनको वहाँ से। फिर दिनमान में लंबा उनका समय रहा और प्रतियों की संख्या बहुत बढ़ गई। फिर इनके साथ जो है जयप्रकाश नारायण के साथ जो मूवमेंट शुरू हुआ। एक और अच्छी बात मैं बताना चाहूँगा आपको कि नया प्रतीक जब बना और इमरजेंसी जब लागू हुई, उस समय वो 1 महीने के अंदर इनको दुष्यंत की कविता को करते हैं कि हो गई है पीर पर्वत सी पिघलनी चाहिए, उसको पब्लिश करते हैं वो। सी इज डेयरिंग। देन नवभारत टाइम्स 77 में आता, मतलब ये सीरीज ऑफ इवेंट्स लगातार हैं और एक एरा है पूरा जो रिवॉल्यूशनाइज। अच्छा, इनफैक्ट अक्षय से मेरी बात हो रही थी, ही वाज द पर्सन जो कि नवभारत टाइम्स में फाइट करता है सैलरी के लिए सारे पत्रकारों के, और फिर रिजाइन कर देता है, और मतलब दिनमान में भी रिजाइन करके छोड़ देता 2-3 बार कि ये कंडीशंस मानोगे तो मैं रहूंगा, नहीं तो नहीं रहूंगा। सच ए कमांडिंग पोजीशन में एक पत्रकार है जो बदल रहा है पूरा परिवेश।
Another thing I find interesting about Agyeya is that while a lot of Hindi writers were centered very much within India, Agyeya had a kind of global vision and interest in his traveling, writing. Tell us a little bit about that.
That, I think it's all, and someone once asked him very much later in life, and he said it all started from my father's library, His father's library, said, took me all over the world, the kind of books, the kind of, and he kept at it. Even in jail, if you find that he's telling someone who's outside the jail, in this case Janendra Kumar, what to read, and and Janendra Kumar is elder to him, and he's the one telling him about Russian literature, American literature, everything. So there is this great deal of hunger, but again, another of the contradictions of Agyeya is he's so cosmopolitan and eclectic about his reading, writing. But then he, by 70s, we find he's taken a very hard position that one should only write in their mother tongue. And again, people give him example of Nabokov, and he says, don't give me example of an exception. It only proves my rule, my theory. And so much so that this position is almost bordering on Hindi chauvinism. He's dismissive of every Indian writer in English, be it Mulk Rajanand was his friend, Raja Rao, or Khushwant Singh, everyone. He's saying that nobody knows how to write English. And he himself wants everything to be translated in English. And he's working very hard throughout. You see, he made great friends in America who were translating him. Leonard Nathan, Rodamal, Josephine Miles, everyone was translating him. But then he wanted to write in Hindi and be known in English abroad.
But इसके साथ साथ लेकिन कंट्रोवर्सी पीछा नहीं छोड़ता उनका, चाहे CCF CIA का लिंकिंग की बात हो, जयप्रकाश नारायण का इवेंट का बात हो, या फोर्ड ने $25,000 उस समय फोर्ड का देना कोई छोटी मोटी बात नहीं है। और फिर जब जनता दल की सरकार आती है तो वो बैन कर देती है, कोई फॉरेन करेंसी नहीं आएगी कंट्री में, तो फिर वो नया प्रतीक का पूरा फंडिंग बंद हो जाता। सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स आर हैपनिंग टुगेदर, बट ही इज विद ऑल द पार्टीज। आप वो अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी के साथ जो हैं उत्तराखंड में बुक वो कर रहे हैं, आप फिर कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी के साथ आप लॉन्च कर रहे हैं, आप कुछ और कर रहे हैं, मतलब ही कांग्रेस के साथ वो अलग कर रहे हैं। तो मतलब उनका एक अपना पाथ है, ही इज नॉट फॉलोइंग एनीबॉडीज पाथ, ही इज नॉट इनटू एनीबॉडीज इश्यूज।
So clearly a writer and a man who's very difficult to define.
Yeah, yeah. He was
and-
first free thinker of the Hindi world. I call him the first free thinker of the Hindi world.
Yeah.
IBM को लाना, IBM का एडवर्टाइजमेंट शुरू करना, उस समय कितना फॉर्ड IBM को आप लेके आ रहे हैं, यहाँ US वर्सेस रसिया वाली बात हो रही है.
And a man of such contradictions, sometimes it's hard to reconcile
Yeah,
the
hard to
contradictions in his
But that's what
character.
makes his life fascinating
That's
also.
what, yes,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. Are there any questions anybody wants to ask? If not, then I will ask you one question.
नहीं, हमारे दो एक्सपर्ट मित्र हमारे सामने दिख रहे हैं, त्रिपुरारी और कुशमाकर. ये दोनों वैसे तो पुलिस अधिकारी हैं लेकिन साहित्य में बहुत ज़्यादा अभिरुचि रखते हैं. सो आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट देम कि पढ़े लिखे हैं, इस किताब को पूरा उन्होंने मथा हुआ है. सो
सॉरी, ऐसी बात नहीं है. मैं सच आप लोगों को सुनने आया हूँ क्योंकि मेरी सिस्टर इन लॉ ने कुछ दिन पहले मुझे एक बुक गिफ्ट किया, दैट इज रिटन बाय यू. सो आई हैव रेड अगे, बट ही इज ऑल्सो वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पर्सनैलिटी. सो वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग बुक, बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली इज टू थिक. सो आई एम जस्ट मेकिंग ऑफ माइंड, मेकिंग लाइक प्रिपेयरिंग माई सेल्फ टू स्टार्ट द बुक. It's nice hearing all of you. It's wonder.
It's a very
hearing all
easy
three of
read.
you.
आपको लगेगा नहीं इतनी मोटी.
I'll
आप
definitely
पढ़ेंगे
try.
तो you'll
Yeah,
keep reading.
yeah. I'll definitely
It's
try.
very
the way,
riveting.
yeah. I should get a feel of Shekhar Jeevni type. कुछ feel आएगा उसमें.
If there's no other question, I actually want to end with a question of my own. You mentioned that in his later years, he became almost like a, everyone should write in their mother tongue and Angrezi mein nahi likho. He seemed to have changed in some other ways also, no?
See,
Was it age? What was it?
partly age, partly the kind of people he had surrounded himself with, partly his falling, he was just not well in the last 4-5 years. He had been keeping very unwell. So we find no mention of religion in his early works. We find the same Agyeya going to temples,
Agyeya.
doing rituals. He goes to Bikaner and actually sits through some kind of a havan which will give him long life or which will cure him of his illness. He goes for, he attends political events which everyone says what is happening, So although in the middle of all this, he does raise some very serious questions about secularism, which actually come to think of it, they are very serious questions. Even scholars like Ashish Nandi and many others have been debated those things. And we also find one of the kind of most scathing criticism of Hindu nationalism and all by Agyeya in Dinman. So he had changed by then. He had completely, if this writer who died very young, Hindi writer Malyaj, someone should read his diaries, 5 volumes of his diaries, where he said, it's going and seeing Agyeya is like, for hours he'll sit quietly and people around him will talk and he will only nod or not nod and people will wait for that nod to happen or not happen. So it was that Agyeya. It was even early, he was not a man who was known for being garrulous or talkative or anything, but it was very different Agyeya. It's a prophet Agyeya.
Akshay,
And like all prophets, it was...
I'll ask one question from you. मुझे एक जगह पूरी किताब में अनलाइक अगेय लगा कि जब वो एक कविता लिखते हैं अशोक वाजपेयी के अगेंस्ट में, कसाई खाना, और कसाई खाना में वो लिखते हैं कि क्या हो रहा है भोपाल के अंदर, बड़ा ही बहुत ही रफ विद अ टिप्पणी ऑफ अशोक वाजपेयी की, जो चारा है और लोग आते हैं चारा खा के चले जाते हैं, बहुत ही क्रिटिक. तो मुझे पूरे जितना मैंने अगेय को पढ़ा उसमें वो वहाँ पे जो अगेय कैरेक्टर है वो बिल्कुल अनलाइक अगेय है.
नहीं, वो उससे पहले भी कर चुके हैं. अगर आप उनका जो जिसको लिमरिक्स बोलते 3-4 लाइंस के, some of the worst thing he wrote was on Sanjay Gandhi, on Raghveer Sahai, everyone. And there was a phase when he was churning out some 5 of them every day. Yeah, and they were like, they were just call them DTs, call them limericks, call them whatever you want. But they were very scathing. And unlike Agyeya, crude also. In the larger body of Agyeya's work, they're crude. But then, yeah, he was doing it. There was a whole column in Naya Pratik where such attacks will happen. And when Ashok Bajpayee was big daddy in Bhopal, he'll say he's just ये कसाई खाना चला रहे हैं वहाँ पे. लोगों को आते हैं वहाँ गाय आते हैं चरने के लिए. So it's full of sarcasm. And Ashok Bajpayee also didn't forget it for long, because they were attacking each other all the time. Yeah.
So I think with a charismatic man full of contradictions, impossible to pigeonhole, and I like your phrase, the first free thinker of modern India. We can leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.